In the courtyard of a new building in London stands a sculpture. Some people admire it, some are puzzled. Many wonder whose work it is. In fact, it's the work of Barbara Hepworth, for many years a leading personality amongst artists who pioneered modern art in Britain. She was trained at the same art school as Henry Moore. Her work has been shown all over Europe and in North and South America. She has received many of the honors which come to artists whose fame and distinction are international. Here, her powerful sculpture enlivens the towering walls of the city, but she herself still works in the surroundings she chose more than 20 years ago at St. Ives, near Land's End in Cornwall. Barbara Hepworth works with wood, stone, and metal. Her work fills 3 or 4 studios round her house. The weight of the great blocks and the storing of her sculptures are amongst the greatest problems she has to face. Some of her work is small and intimate in size, but much of it is massive and monumental. Arranging an exhibition involves the packing and the transport, by rail, by air, and by sea, of a mass of sculpture weighing more than the contents of an average home. The shapes of her sculptures may remind one of the shapes of hills and trees. Their contours flow in the rhythms of the sea, of the beach, of sand dunes, of birds in flight, or of the human figure. Her sculpture may call these things to mind, but it never describes them. Their meaning is ambiguous. The rugged landscape of Penwith in Cornwall is where Barbara Hepworth has worked for many years, but she was born in a Yorkshire town where the mill chimneys and the stone-cobbled streets were a harsh contrast to the open moorland round about. Her feelings for the contrasts of the Yorkshire scene are part of her earliest childhood recollections.
All my early memories are of forms and shapes and textures. I remember moving through the landscape with my father in his car, and the hills were sculptures, The roads defined the forms. There was the sensation of moving physically over the fullness of a moor and through the hollows and slopes of peaks and dales, feeling, seeing, touching through the mind, the eye and the hand. The touch and texture of things. Sculpture, rock, myself, and the landscape. This sensation has never left me. I, the sculptor, am the landscape.
Barbara Hepworth's love for this Cornish landscape is complete. She feels for its history, its geology, and every part of its varied geography. Though her work is abstract, her sculptures often bear the old Cornish names given to the features of an ancient kingdom. Names like Trivalgan, or Trinona, or Pendawa. Penwith landscape is dominated by the sea, but behind the sea, the hard features of the land are concealed beneath a profusion of growth. This almost tropical luxury is in extreme contrast to the wild and elemental nature of the hills and the coast. A brilliant light clarifies every color and every image. Standing in the garden by her studio, one can believe that one is living in a Mediterranean country. The precise forms of her sculpture have the clean-cut beauty of Greek or Italian art.
It took a long time for me to find my own personal way of making sculpture, a long time to discover the purest forms which would exactly evoke my own sensations, and to visualize images which would express the timelessness of primitive forces which I felt, and the constant urges towards survival and growth which I knew to be fundamental both to the human being and to the landscape in which we stand. I have always loved the joy of carving and the rhythm of movement that grows in the sculpture itself, just as I like dancing or skating. I like the relaxation of sound and movement. When I am carving, or when I am listening to someone else carving, I know what is happening not by what I see, but what I hear. The tools a sculptor uses become his friends, and they become intensely personal to one, the most precious extensions of one's sight and touch. The right hand is the motor in carving, and the left hand is the thinking, feeling hand. Feeling the use of the gouge, the chisel, the adze, the point. All these tools have their special uses, and the left hand senses the organic structure of the material as it feels its way about the form.
Although her earliest sculpture was realistic, it already had a strong feeling for monumental shapes and for surfaces which were characteristic of the materials from which they were carved. But increasingly she worked with more freedom as her ideas developed. Her sculptures became more abstract, but their reference to the human figure still remained. Then the human figure was used to express the artist's deepest feelings in the sculptural language of shapes and forms.
It is difficult to describe in words the meaning of forms because it is precisely this emotion which is conveyed by sculpture alone. Our sense of touch is a fundamental sensibility which comes into action at birth. The ability to feel weight and form and assess its significance. The forms which have had a special meaning for me since childhood have been the standing form, which is the translation of my feeling towards the human being standing in landscape. The two forms, which is the tender relationship of one living thing beside another. And the closed form, such as the oval, spherical, or pierced form, sometimes incorporating color, which translate for me the association and closeness of the human figure to landscape. These forms also translate for me the closeness of mother and child, or the feeling of the embrace of living things, either in nature or in the human spirit. In all these shapes, the evocation of what one feels about man and nature must be conveyed by the sculptor in terms of mass, inner tension, and rhythm, scale in relation to our human size, and the quality of surface which speaks through our hands as well as eyes.
Not all of Barbara Hepworth's work is abstract. Often an artist feels the need to work in a realistic way, and realistic paintings and drawings are complementary to the carving and modeling of abstract work. One series of such pictures were studies of the hands and figures of nurses and surgeons at work in a hospital operating theatre. The artist was making a record of a subject which she had seen in reality. But the artist can do more than record in a pictorial manner, for this artist is a person who can project her feelings into the materials she is using until they correspond to the reality of her imagination, and so make us feel what she felt.
Many people select a stone or a pebble to carry for the day. The weight and form and texture felt in our hands relates us to the past and gives us a sense of a universal force. The beautifully shaped stone, washed up by the sea, is a symbol of continuity, a silent image of our desire for survival, peace, and security.
A group of the stones which Barbara Hepworth found on the beaches around St. Ives looks like an imaginary landscape. We don't often look at things as closely as the artist does. The artist trains us to use our eyes. A crystal of quartz is one of Barbara Hepworth's most valued possessions. Just a lump of mineral found in the ground, but its delicate beauty stirs her imagination, and it stirs ours too. The sculptor sees the beauty of nature and has the intuition and the skill to pin it down in concrete terms. This is sculpture which is composed much as music is composed, and abstract sculpture is a kind of visual music. Barbara Hepworth is convinced of the value of our response to the shapes, textures, and rhythms of the world about us. She believes that in our materialistic age, this response to the qualities and values of things is particularly important, for painting and sculpture appeal to the roots of our being. To many people, the importance of abstract art is not at all clear, for we've been accustomed to a kind of art which sought perfection in pictorial realism. Barbara Hepworth's art cannot be read or understood in those terms. Her work may follow nature, but it never imitates it. From her materials, she has made sculptures of the finest workmanship, whose shapes and surfaces have a great beauty. The natural qualities of stone, of wood, or metal have been completely revealed. She has manipulated volumes and spaces into complex constructions whose lines and surfaces flow with an unbroken subtlety and grace. Instinctively, she seems to have discovered compositions and proportions as satisfying as any we have known. The spaces and volumes of her sculptures seem inevitable. She has created beauty, and who can do more than that?
It may be that the sensation of being a woman presents another emphasis in art, and particularly in terms of sculpture, for there is a whole range of perception belonging to feminine experience. So many ideas spring from an inside response to form. A nut in its shell, or a child in the womb, or the structures of growth in shells and crystals, the hidden energy and rhythms of wood and stone, and the pure and gentle quality of reflected light on the surfaces of natural material, which produces sensations of vitality, security, and calm. When I am making a drawing, I like to begin with a board which I have prepared with a definite texture and tone. I like to rub and scrape the surfaces as I might handle the surface of a sculpture. The surface takes my mood in color and texture. Then a line or a curve made on it has a bite, rather like cutting into a slate. Then one gets lost in a world of space and creation with 1,000 possibilities, because the next line one draws in association with the one before will have a compulsion about it, which will carry one forward into unknown territory. The conclusion will be reached by a sense of balance. Suddenly, before one's eyes is a new form which, from a sculptor's point of view, can be deepened or extended, twisted, tightened, hardened, flattened according to one's will, as one brings to it one's own special life. And in this kind of non-realistic art, the artist is free to follow his imagination and to create precisely to his will. What one does springs from a profound response to life itself.